Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Ancestral Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Well, I have to start by apologizing because I did not have time to refresh my nail polish before starting to record this video, and I never do that, but these days we have moved to a new place, and as you can imagine, we're just surrounded by boxes to the point that it's actually kind of overwhelming. And I just did not have time. I worked ever since last Saturday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, and this is the extent of my bruises, just to give you an idea. And luckily, there's been a bit of a going back to winter in the last couple of days in Sydney, so I'm actually wearing long sleeves. Otherwise, I will have to explain things, which is, you know, it's having worked as a volunteer in a women's shelter. I had, you know, goosebumps when I thought about it. I thought the fact of, oh, hang on a second, let me you know, lower my sleeves because I'm going to the shops and someone's going to ask me. But on the other hand, it's also good to know that the community is there for you, right? I mean, they would be actually reacting when they see something like that. And when I was volunteering for the women's shelter, I can assure you that the stories of the girls, because they were so young, that came through, you know, one of the things that they were pointing out was that not a lot of people was actually intervening. They were not asking, they were not, even though it was pretty clear that they did not have an easy situation. But anyway, so I started from the nail polish and I ended up talking about something really serious. But the theme of today's video is actually quite serious because I'm talking about, we're going to have a look at the ancestral work that I do this time of the year. I tend to do ancestral work the whole year round, but when it comes to Halloween, this time of the year, for me it's not just spooky season, even though I really love it. But on the other hand, it's also a reminder of every single person that I have loved and is not with us anymore. And if you feel like, if you also have lost someone, and you want to see how this season could turn into a way for you to actually communicate with them or feel them perhaps closer to you more than usual, I can tell you that the energies that are in play in the last couple of weeks are incredibly strong and so very conducive of this type of communication. And please understand that by communication, I don't necessarily mean a verbal communication. I only had a couple of times an actual verbal communication with a person that was not with us anymore. And even so, it was incredibly subtle. So I'm not a medium, and I wish I were. Honestly, I do, because it would be wonderful to talk to someone who's not there anymore. But I do communicate with them nonetheless. And this time of the year is just fantastic. So communication can mean any kind of exchange of energy that you feel comes from them. And it's also something that I use in tarot a lot, tarot and oracle decks, in order to be able to understand what the message is and who's it coming from this kind of season. Because let me tell you, the veil this October, any October, the veil is very thin, but this year, for whatever reason, probably because of certain alignment of celestial bodies or events in one's lives, the veil this particular year is much thinner than I've ever felt before. So let's have a look. And first of all, I'm just going to light up a candle because that's something that I always do. And ironically, I don't necessarily do that when I read tarot. I do that sometimes. I am always very mindful that I have a couple of cats, and whenever it's a scented candle, they can actually have allergic reactions depending on the oils that are present in the candle to make it scented. But I closed the door now, so it's going to be okay, hopefully. So let's have a look, because I'm going to show you today a combination of Oracle and Tarot decks, pairings as well, and also a spread that I use this time of the year in order to be able to understand what the message is and who's it coming from. And I hope that they will be helpful for you as well. So let's have a look. So one deck that I really love at this time of the year, and it's actually a very recent release, it's the Beloved Dead Oracle, and it's quite expressly dedicated to this kind of practice, because it says an oracle for divining ancestral wisdom, and it's by the very famous and much beloved Carrie Paris and Tina Hart. It's a Wiser Book publication. It's a really nice wraparound box with the magnetic closure. You've seen this, right? You've seen this deck. There's been a few walkthroughs in a few channels. So I'm not necessarily going to give you a walkthrough. What I'm going to show you today, as I said before, it's a number of decks that I like to use this season, and I'm going to show you a couple of pairings that I like to do with these decks. And then we're just going to have a quick look at a spread, which is a spread that I always use in order to be able to try and understand, you know, what, because I insist on saying that, what the message is, what is the message, and where's it coming from, because that is one of the most important things that we really have to understand. And it's all about this All Hallows Eve season. So the Beloved Dead, the book is very, very interesting. I really like it because it works as if it were an archetype, let's say an archetypal kind of deck. So it works as if all of the cards were referring back to an archetype, and this archetype is very helpful in order for you to understand, to do some work around it and understand whose the message is from. So who's there, who's talking to you? Use this deck, because I can assure you that if you do ask this question, it will necessarily answer the proper way, and it will also make you, you know, it will make everything around you in such a way that it's very conducive of this kind of conversation and communications. I honestly do believe that when the energy is this strong, you probably don't necessarily need this deck in specific, but it does help. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So as I said, this deck is, it's been around for probably a month, not longer than that. But do you see what I mean when I talk about archetypes? So the survival, the snake, the shine, the visitation, the wholesome, the wise guy. So obviously these will be more clear when you read the guidebook, but I believe in some kind of an intuitive work when you use this deck, because after all, we're required to be more attuned to what the spirits are going to tell us. And therefore, if we open our eyes, if we open our third eye, if we open our ears, but also any kind of, you know, sensory kind of communication that is coming our way, if we are open to receive that, to treasure that, to understand that, and also to honor that, it's exactly what we need to do. And we will be rewarded with the possibility to see, to feel this really powerful connection with someone that we used to love, we still do, we still love them. But you know, unfortunately, they're not with us anymore. So as you can see, for example, here, the deck is actually, you could divide it in two. There's, okay, so there's one part which is mostly dedicated, sorry about that, you couldn't see the title. So one part is mostly dedicated to the archetypes, as I call them. And then there's a few cards that are called Act of Love. As you can see, observation, do nothing, etc. So these cards are really interesting because not only if you separate the deck and you use them in different layouts, in different positions of a spread, you can actually use it such as the Beloved deck, the Beloved Dead cards that are referring back to archetypes will tell you who's there. And when you want to ask the spirit what the best way to honor them is, then you can actually pull a card from the Act of Love pile, because it will really tell you, you know, do nothing, for example, forgiveness and faith. So it will definitely tell you how best to honor their message and, you know, put it in practice if it's something that it's perhaps an encouragement or an action for you to take. But we'll have a look at that later. So this deck, as I said, really, really beautiful as well. If you're familiar with Carrie Paris's work, this is very similar to the, what's it called, the Relative Tarot, which I used to have, but the problem with the Relative Tarot for me was it was kind of confusing. So I had a slight, let's say, brain-related problem with the Relative Tarot, in the sense that if you're familiar with it, it still uses the same kind of vintage photos, let's say, collage, and then it puts them together with what looks like a tracing of the original cards from the traditional RWS system. So you can recognize the card because of the images on the card, which is just a trace, but then you see the photos overstacked, so overlapping them. And that's creating a bit of confusion for my brain. So I don't necessarily work with that one, even though every time I see it on social media, I actually really like it. And I think to myself, I should probably get another copy. But what I'm going to pair it with, and it sits here in this really beautiful bag, is the Hudo Tarot. So the Hudo Tarot is a really beautiful deck for a root worker. It's actually the one of, I think, the best tarot deck that I have got, at least in my collection, when it comes to you know, understanding what is root work and the origins and how to carry it out, and how to even, you know, put yourself in such a situation in which you can actually perceive the messages coming from the divination of the root worker, which is not very simple. It's not something, it's something that is as ancient as a tradition as anything, as humanity. And the reason why that is because people always, they're very uncomfortable with the unknown. Human beings are very uncomfortable with something we do not know. And what happens is that, generally speaking, something that we do not know is something that we fear. Not only are we uncomfortable with that, but we're actually scared of that because we don't know it, we don't understand it, we don't know what it's going to do, and we're also worried that it's going to hurt us. So what happens is that root workers, since the beginning of time, have been trying to close that gap between not knowing and being scared of it, and actually getting a little bit of awareness about this communication with the spirits. And well, as you can see, some of the cards are actually not pulling any punches because they're quite intense. But I do appreciate this deck very, very much. There's a lot of symbols in this deck. There's a lot of these symbols that actually come from my own very own past and ancestors, in the sense that my auntie used to be working a lot with root work, and she was, you know, she was working with bone throwing, with charm casting. She was reading numerology. That's probably one of the reasons why I am very much convinced that numerology is the best way to read tarot. So this card, for example, Dan Burns, and this is the Judgment card, and this is definitely the root worker explaining the reason why you know, these bones have fallen in a certain way. What does that mean? What significance or meaning has been assigned to these bones in a certain way? And this person is actually quite surprised, because they probably did not expect it to hear what the root worker is saying. So my auntie was doing that, was doing a lot of bone throwing, and it was always, you know, nowadays it's very difficult to ethically source bones for bone throwing. And so what happens is that most of the time you will see that many shops offer you the possibility to buy a set, like a complete set, but most of the time they will have more charms than bones. And I'm actually kind of a purist in the sense that I prefer to have a you know, for bone throwing I prefer to have only bones, and I have my set for charm casting as well, but that is not exactly the same thing. But in any case, let's have a look at how these two decks pair up together. I'm just going to give it a quick shuffle. I remember I probably showed this pairing in another video before, probably my September favorite pairings or my October favorite pairings. I honestly don't remember which one, because I think that these two have a really great way to communicate with each other. There's a lot of resonances, a lot of synchronicities that happen when you pay attention to them, because that's all there is to it this season. I'm just going to zoom out a bit. So that's all there is this season. We need to be perceptive. We need to be open to understand what is being told us, what the message is. So when you open yourself to also, these kind of messages come to you in many different ways. And it's not, we're not talking about something difficult. We're talking about starting with very little, very small, very easy kind of practices. So for example, when you read something like these two decks together, when you pair them up together, be open, be mindful to recognize the messages through the resonances and the similarities and the consistencies between the cards. So when you see something that may remind you of something, that may be related to someone or something, then the message is there. It's definitely there. You're not dreaming. It actually is there for you. Because this is the way that, someone who's not there anymore has to communicate with us. That's the way they do it. And obviously, there's some of us have a more direct kind of way to communicate with spirits. But the majority of us, we have to find a different way. We have to find a way in which we are comfortable. We're not scared. We feel probably just a little bit challenged, in the sense that it cannot be that easy anyway. But you need to be ready to listen. That's something that sounds much easier than what it actually is, because being ready to listen means also being ready to admit, to understand the message, to eventually take responsibility for it, whatever the message is. If our ancestors are telling us something that we don't necessarily want to hear, but we need to be open to that as well. It's not always, sometimes it's a very strong advice to do something or to stop doing something else. So once we are open to understand the message and also to act on it and to honor it, we have to be ready to do anything by that point. So can you see what I'm talking about? Can you see the fact that there are so many similarities? When you start comparing the colors, for example, we have the same sepia tone, the same type of very muted color palette, but we also have this vintagey feel to both of the cards, even though the style is not exactly the same, because we're looking at photographies here, and we're looking at probably paintings here, so it's not the same type of art, but they do work really well together, and they really, really speak volume when you just listen. So these two are the Beloved Dead Oracle and the Hudo Tarot. Another deck that I wanted to show you today when we talk about working with ancestral energies. It's the African Gods Oracle, Magic and Spells of the Orishas. This is by Diego de Oxossi, I think it's pronounced like that. If not, apologies. This is the illustrator. So this deck is a Rockpool publication. It's not super recent. I don't remember exactly when I acquired it, but it was a few months ago. But I never really found a good, let's say this is an Oracle deck, so I never really found a good tarot to pair it with. I am quite familiar with the Orishas, not because of my own ancestry, because of course I'm Italian-Irish, so I don't have that kind of ancestors. However, one of my closest friends, she does, and so her relatives come from Africa, and she's very familiar with the Orishas, to the point that she's actually from Cuba, but I met her in China because she was actually teaching Spanish at the University of Jilin. And basically we talked about the Orishas, and she took me to a Santero. We've done a couple of ceremonies and blessings. And after that, that was back in 2005, I think. And after that, I started, you know, getting acquainted with this really interesting, very, very intense and also very ancient kind of culture. You can see the cult of the Orishas in different places. Personally, I've also been to Cuba, for example, where there's a strong sense of the Santeria. But there's also a lot that you can do when you study these kind of cultures. For example, if it is not your culture, it is very respectful to know as much as possible, to do, you know, to inform yourself and try and understand with, you know, being humble and open to understand this culture that is not our own. And that's exactly what I would expect anyone to do with my own culture when they don't come from my culture. It's something that, you know, it's always very flattering to hear that someone is interested to know about my past and my roots, my where I come from, etc. And I'm always very happy to talk about it. And I noticed that whenever I got in touch with this friend of mine, she was always very, very pleased and happy to explain to me, you know, the how this works. Basically, let me tell you, it's a very complex kind of system. And this deck, talking about the deck itself, it's really beautiful. It's got this kind of odd kind of gilding that came to me already chipped in several places. I never replaced it. It's not the easiest, let's say, to get it replaced when you buy it. I think I bought it from a retailer. It's also because I opened it after a couple of weeks that I got it. I did not have time to just go through it when I got it. But it's very beautiful. I really like this papery kind of feel that the finish of this deck has. And it's just, the color palette is very nice, very conducive, very beautiful. It's a very artistic kind of deck. And there's a different, you will see that there's a few names that are recurring. This is a really beautiful but also very intense, as you can imagine, card. I have to say, this deck is not a hug deck. It's a very strong deck. It's a very powerful one, but because of the messages. So there's a few messages that will be very strong, and they will sound perhaps even too strong, in a sense that it doesn't pull any punches, and it's not meant to. So I do recommend, you know, doing a bit of work and studying, and you will appreciate it a lot more once you start understanding the difference between the meanings, these names, for example, what do they stand for, what the meaning is behind them, and not just as an oracle deck, because as I said, studying is one of my favorite things, and I never stop studying. So I always try and find new ways to keep myself and my brain occupied. Now, what happened was that I was, you know, looking at this deck a few times, and I didn't necessarily know what to pair it with. So I was looking for a tarot deck because this is an oracle, and I wasn't sure because I do have, oh, again, this card. Okay, well, if you insist, okay, I will keep you on the top. So I have a few decks that I could have paired it with, but for some reason I was never really happy about the result. But then one day, I don't know, don't ask me how this happened. I don't know whether it was an epiphany, I don't know whether it was fortuitous. I just had a look at the Japanese tarot, which is trimmed. So my copy is trimmed because it was way too big for my hands. I did not do an excellent job, as you can tell, by trimming, but it's also partly because unfortunately the printing is off center, as you can tell. And so I will have to retrim it. I didn't even edge it because I knew that I will have to repair the damage. It's not a massive deal, but you know, these, you can tell these lines, for example, it really throws me off when I see them. And so we'll just have to go through it just one more time to even it out, and then I can definitely edge it. And I can assure you, I love this deck so much. It's so beautiful. The symbology is amazing. The artwork is fantastic. The contracts with the colors, it's really down my alley. And I thought to myself, you know what, the colors are similar, and let's just try, you know, let's just try. Sometimes I just really try. I don't know whether it's going to work or not. I don't always know these things in advance. It's a matter of trying. And when the result is good, you have, generally speaking, it's something unexpected that is even making you even happier, because you find something and it feels like it was almost, as I said, an epiphany. But these two together are absolutely fantastic. I don't know whether it's because of the energies being very similar, whether it's because of the intensity itself of the cards, but they also read really, really well together. It's just to give you an idea. So this is card number 31, Alafia. No harm can hurt those who live in peace with themselves, which is something extremely true. And the Nine of Fire, which is obviously the Nine of Wands, obviously talking about the let's say the resilience, most of all, the fact that you've done so much already, you've taken so much already upon your shoulders, and you've reached a point in which you're considering, what am I going to do? What am I doing? I'm exhausted already. You're hurt. You know, most of the time the person is has got a limb which is bandaged, for example. So you're hurt. It's the 9 though, it's not the 10. You're not there yet. It's not completion of the suit of the fire. So you still have something to do. You still have somewhere to go. You still have some effort to put into that. But don't worry, because the hurt that comes from being exhausted and being depleted will not harm you, because you are in peace with yourself. You are completing something that is very demanding of you, but you're doing that because you believe in it. And so we are reminded also back to with the Jester of Tides, that this is the way in which feelings tie back into the suit of fire, which is a very concrete, let's say. It's a very strong and powerful suit, but it doesn't necessarily go back to feelings. So the way in which we tie back to that is through the idea that when we are in peace with our own feelings, our own emotions, when we know how to maturely acknowledge them, and I'm going to say something specifically coming from psychology. We talk about self-regulating your emotions. Self-regulating, so you do it yourself, your own emotions. This is an extremely important message, because self-regulation is something that we learn when we're approximately between the ages of 4 and 7. And if we don't, it's extremely difficult to do it afterwards. So that's why I always say childhoods are incredibly important for our development, because most of our inner child wounds are determining our future as adults. So we really need to look into them and heal them if, you know, they are present. So see, we started with just a couple of words, and then we expanded on that message. And I really found that these two together, that's exactly what they do. They really do present you with the possibility of expanding on a very important message. And generally speaking, the thematics that come out of reading with these two are they're very important. It can be something that is related to your daily life, but it can also be related to your mind or your spirit. You just, as I said before, you just have to listen. You just have to be open to possibilities. So let's have a look at another one, for example. Stubbornness only brings unnecessary wars between the Empress and the Queen of Wands. Now, this is... So we're... witnessing a very strong exchange of energy here, because we have a look at the Empress, and the Oracle card is telling us that stubbornness is not a good thing. Okay, it brings unnecessary wars, and wars it should never be necessary. So being stubborn is a negative thing. The way in which we look at this Empress, in particular in this deck, is a very active kind of empress. Generally speaking, we will see an empress that is pregnant and is sitting and is peaceful and is surrounded with, you know, the symbols, but just to point out that how she's nurturing, for example. But in this case, it's a very active, almost, I would say, like a warrior kind of empress. And it's really, it's kind of taking out the meaning of the oracle card, because it makes you look at this empress in this way. Talking about war makes you look at this particular empress as if this empress was a person who's preparing themselves to go to war. But let's not forget that wars are not necessary. Okay, and so we look at the Queen of Winds, and the Queen of Winds is, the suit of Winds is the suit of air, of course, and the suit of air is the suit of swords. So we're looking at the suit, we're looking at the Queen of Swords, which is basically telling us in this case that we need to apply reason. We need to understand what's going on instead of actually starting, you know, the fight, because that's what we feel like doing. This oracle card is telling us, don't be stubborn and don't start a war that is unnecessary. So this is a message that is actually conveyed by both the oracle and the tarot cards. And just another one, so afraid of what the future may be, you didn't act. This is one of my favorite cards, because every time it comes in one of my personal readings, I know it to be true. And I always know, no matter when I do the reading, I actually always understand what this is referring to, what I actually missed out on because I was afraid of it. And it's between the Eight of Wands, which again is the suit of swords. So the Eight of Swords is the cage of your own making. You're actually that. You even look at the key. See this? This is the key. You're in a cage, you're in a prison, but you have the key. You can get out. So this is basically the same card. It's telling you, you were so afraid of getting out that you didn't. You missed out on going out, and you know, who knows how many more things you're missing out on because of that. So be the fool for once. Be the one that is actually taking a step into the unknown and jumping and saying, oh, whatever happens, it doesn't matter. See how well these two actually read together? It's really crazy. And I really, I don't know, if you have the Japanese, let me know if you pair it up with a different deck, with a different oracle deck. It would be interesting to know, because these two decks are actually quite difficult to pair up. But I do believe that the energies are very, very strong when they are together. Let's have a look at another couple of decks. So this deck is very recent in my collection. It's the Wisdom of the Elders Oracle by Sean Leonard. The artwork is by Tracy Metallic and Aaron Gugu. As always, apologies if I'm not pronouncing the names correctly, but these are the way in which they're spelled. So there you go. So this deck is by Hay House. It was one of the very first decks that I received at a new place, and I was really excited about it, because originally I thought I would have had to wait, because of living in Australia means that you get to wait 6 months, you know, for American published decks to be delivered, or at least to be released in Australia. Originally, it had a release date of March next year, but I had seen it in Lisa's Hot Takes, for example. I had seen another couple of YouTube channels. I really like it, and I was really excited about it. And when I saw on Amazon that it was actually available in Australia as well, I literally jumped on it, because it's very affordable. It's a mass market. It's a typical Hay House cardstock, which I have to be honest, it might not be my favorite, but I actually don't mind it. It's fine. It's papery. It's very good to the touch. The cards slides very well. And, you know, you can fan them out. You can shuffle them. And I really like the way in which they used the saturation of the colors. These are the backs. They're really, really beautiful. And it's one of those decks that is very powerful. You wouldn't believe it when, you know, you order something, you see it online, you order or in a shop, and you buy it. And then you wait for it, and then it gets delivered, and then you have a look at it. And you're just blown away, because it's such a powerful deck, such a beautiful deck sometimes, such a powerful one, or it means something special to you in specific. And this is one of those decks. It's a very, very strong deck. The messages that come across are very intense, to the point that, as I've said a couple of times before in this video, because I am using those types of decks, sometimes it may be a little bit overwhelming. Therefore, the reason why I still use it, but I actually pair it up with the Gentle Tarot by Mary in the Sky. The Gentle Tarot, I know that everyone knows this deck. It's super duper famous, and for a reason, because it's really beautiful, but it's also because it's one of those hug decks that you use when, for example, you are going through something and you need a bit of a pat on the back or a hug, for example. But also in my case, I use it when the oracle that I'm using is a bit too strong, comes across a bit too too harsh, and perhaps I need a kind of a gentle one, which is ironic because most of the time we were actually referring back to tarot decks as being too strong, the slap in the face, and oracle decks being the gentle and the kind ones. But in this case it's the opposite, so I immediately thought of the Gentle Tarot. And it's also because I believe it's actually a really good combination. I mean, when you look at the aesthetics, they match up, I think, rather well. We're looking at a very similar combination of colors. We're looking at a very, there are resonances also when we look at the art style. And I really, really adore it. It's really beautiful. When I am witnessing this kind of exchange between two decks, it's actually, I'm in awe, because it's something that I don't feel like I'm making this. I'm actually witnessing this. I'm not necessarily, yes, I'm the person that paired them up together. I'm the person that is flipping the cards, but that's it. I'm just a spectator. I'm a bystander, and I'm just really happy to have been so lucky to have found these two decks, and also to have understood that they wanted to be right together, to be paired up like this, because you have so much going on in these cards. It's just unbelievable. So this deck, the Wisdom of the Elders, is rather complex. I don't want to say complicated, because it's not, but it is complex in the sense that at least the first couple of times in which you're going to use it, look at the colors. Is it just me? It's just unbelievable. The fact that we have this much, of the upper part of the card referring back to the colors on the left card, and the lower part referring back to the colors of the card on the right. So there is a lot going on here, because it's as if the oracle deck were telling you to look back and forward between the cards, by pointing out at the colors. And what I was saying at the beginning of this video, you need to be open to recognize these synchronicities, let's say echoes, I call them resonances, because that's the way in which you actually open up your third eye. You open up your intuition. You set yourself, you prepare yourself, and you put yourself in the best conditions ever to be able to access this possibility to communicate with the persons beyond the veil. So as I was saying, the first couple of times in which you're using this, okay, is it just me? Okay, yes, we've got the wolf in both cards. Beautiful. So the first couple of times you're going to use this deck, you will have to go back to the guidebook quite a lot, because the cards, they do come with titles. For example, you see here Spring, New Beginnings, which is rather obvious, but other cards are not as straightforward when it comes to the association between the title and the keyword. So for example, tobacco, sacred medicine, reciprocation. It's not, unless you know what tobacco is used for, you don't necessarily know that the keyword, well, why did they choose the keyword reciprocation for that particular plant. So it is something interesting to study if you like studying. But these two together are simply amazing. I just really like the way in which they open up this portal to this wonderful world in which you're really in touch with yourself, with the others, with the cosmos, with your ancestors, because this is strongly based on ancestors medicine, ancestors healing, ancestor energies, and it needs to be read that way, absolutely. So these two will actually gonna be using them later for the spread, so I'm gonna stop here because otherwise I can go on the whole night. It's so beautiful. So as I said, this is the Wisdom of the Elders Oracle, and because it's a deck that is a bit harsh at times, I wanted to pair it up with the Gentle Tarot, which is actually softening the blow. But let's have a look at the last two decks that I wanted to show you today, and then we'll have a look at the spread. And we had to have a look at the Halloween Oracle because it is Halloween. So it's something that I really appreciate. I love this edition. It's by Blue Angel, and the author is Stacey DeMarco, our very own fellow Australian. I really love this deck in specific because this deck looks at first as if it were whimsical, as if it were one of those spooky season kind of decks that is almost funny. It's not. It's actually very strong. It's actually very intense. But what you can actually do is, depending on what you pair it with, but let's have a look at the Oracle. I'm sure that everyone has seen this deck because of the name. Obviously, whenever you Google it, you know, Halloween Oracle, this one comes up because it's the first one, although there's others. But as I said, it's very intense. It's not for giggles. I mean, maybe one or two cards. But this is a very intense, as I was saying, it's a very intense and beautiful, by the way, deck. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to pair it, because as I said before, there you go. So I'm going to pair it with a deck that reminds me a lot of the culture that is the culture par excellence that honors the Day of the Dead, All Hallows Eve, which is of course the Latin culture, and in that case it's called El Día de los Muertos. And Lady de los Muertos reminded me that I wanted to pair it up with this deck, which is the Santa Muerte Tarot. This is by Fabio Listrani. Fabio has made another couple of decks. One of them is called Night Sun Tarot, and then I think he's also the author of, if I'm not wrong, the Goetia and the Notoria, something like that. I may mispronounce that, sorry about that. I don't have the other two decks. I did have the Night Sun Tarot, the mini edition, for a while, but then I wasn't using it and someone really wanted it, so I just passed it along. Let me just have a quick shuffle because I just want to show you these two decks together. And the reason why I'm pairing them up is because I really do believe that the Halloween Oracle, it's a very serious deck, but depending on the tarot you pair it up with, it can also give you, you know, different kind of messages. Again, assuming that you're open to see them and you're open to receive them. So obviously we, as always, we have, you know, a deck that has a title, an image. Obviously the image has a title and a keyword that is referring back to the title. So in this case we have the lamp with remembrance. Why? Because that is something that we do. And I don't know whether it's common to any culture, but in Italy we always light up a candle. Candles are always in cemeteries everywhere. It is a way to signify the soul. So the flame of the candle is embodying basically the soul of the person that has passed. And so lighting up a candle is a way for us to honor the person that is not there with us anymore. So there are different ways in which we honor the beloved dead, and with candles, and it depends a lot on what kind of culture you refer back to. But generally speaking, I seem to see that happening more and more, that we give a lot of meaning to sacred rituals, and it's something that I really I'm very enthusiastic about, because, well, okay, sorry, let me just point out the, as always, echoes and resonances here. We've got a skull, two skulls actually in the oracle card, and we got another two pair of skulls. Oh, actually two more. Oh, there's more. Sorry, I'm actually seeing it just now. So the in each and every one of these flowers there's a skull in the middle, which is kind of obvious because the Santa Muerte Tarot is exactly that. And it is true that the Halloween Oracle has got a lot of skulls in it, so it's probably not that much of an epiphany. But it is a very beautiful coincidence, and I love the fact that we got the DNA helix and we got the leather, which is, you know, reminding us of that as well. Ghost with regret between the Knight of Wands and the Lovers. And I really like that, because the regret that comes from having probably been jumping into the fight too soon, just because you're following orders but you don't necessarily know whether you agree with them or not, and you've got the regret of having taken that choice and realizing that it was not the right choice for you. So as you can see, it's not for laugh. It's not something that will make you giggle. It's something that is actually quite intense. The messages that come across, you know, they're exactly for this time of the year. And let me just say this, let's not be afraid. The messages can be very conducive, they can be very serious, they can be very powerful and intense, but let's not be afraid, because being scared of something means that we're not going to do that. We're not going to listen, because if we're scared, we're not going to look. What the first thing that people do whenever they watch a horror movie and there's a horror scene coming up, there's a jump scare, for example, they look away. So let's not do that. Let's make the effort to listen this season, because there will be a lot of messages. I really have this feeling that this season there's going to be a lot of messages coming through, you know, through the veil, and it's such a pity that we don't get to receive them simply because we're too scared. So these two, I wanted to give a light note to these kind of to the video, but I realized that it's just as intense as all the other decks, and I really like them together. I've seen a lot of people actually trimming off the borders of the Halloween Oracle, but I think that I may actually like it this way. I don't know. I'm getting back into borders. I don't know why. It's, you know, it's the ebb and flow. Sometimes you're into borders, sometimes you're trimming them off. It doesn't matter. So the Halloween Oracle paired up with the Santa Muerte Tarot. These were all of the decks that I wanted to show you today, but please stay tuned, because there is a really interesting and I hope really helpful spread that I wanted to show you. Okay, so I'm going to write the meaning of the positions as a title on the video, so you can actually read it. But the first position, I've chosen actually the Beloved Dead, and I'm actually going to separate the cards that represent an archetype from the cards that we've seen before that represent an act of love. So now that we've separated the cards, so these are, as you can see, not many with the act of love cards, but we take in these ones because these are what I call, or what I refer to as, archetypes. So a quick shuffle. Okay, so the first position is card number 1, and the position is who's here. Okay, who is coming to see us? So what's the archetype of the person that has come to see us in this season in which we feel that the veil is really thin? Wholesome. Okay, I know what this is. Okay, I know who this is. Thank you for coming. So obviously there's it's a chunky deck, so as obviously you will have an archetype for each and every type of personality, so you can definitely find also your own voice, your inner voice. What does your gut tell you? What is this? But who is this person? So for me, it's very clear, because the way in which I refer to this friend of mine who passed away, Daniela, she was always wholesome. She had this personality that was just 100% genuine, and also always so in touch with nature. And that was one of the things that actually always remind me of her, because she changed me as well. I did not used to be as in touch with nature as she used to be, so she actually changed that in me. And by reminding myself of that, of the parts of myself that actually exist thanks to her, to the fact that we were connected in this life, I actually remember her, and you know, it's a way to honor her. So thanks for being there for me. So in position number 2, we're just going to use the Gentle Tarot, because position number 2 is what is their message for me. So just a quick shuffle. Okay. So what is the message? Oh, okay. So, okay, I'm just going to try not to get too emotional. But Ten of Cups, that's, you know, that's her. And that's what she always wanted from me. I don't even know the number of times in which she actually mentioned that. So family, the concept of family, but also of community, the concept of being together. And we've known each other for decades, and she always brought that back to my attention. She always said, you know, family was extremely important for her, and it didn't used to be for me. I don't know why. I ran away from my family for many reasons, and obviously she wanted me to feel that family actually meant something else. And so she was always talking about the next dinner, and who we're going to invite for the next dinner, and what am I going to cook for the next dinner, or the next drinks together, or the next excursions together, or the next movies together. It was always about being together, inviting someone, doing activities with them, relating to them, making connections, being a family. And yeah, so that's her message for me. Yeah, I get it loud and clear. Thanks for that. So in this case now, we're going to use the Wisdom of the Elders deck, because position number 3, which probably will be here for space reasons, is how can I best honor them? So just a quick shuffle. Okay. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Milky Way, the Spirit Road, number 37. So as I was explaining before, in this case, for this book, for this deck, I actually have to have a look at what the guidebook says, because I'm not familiar yet with all of these cards. So this is number 37. Milky Way, Spirit Road, star stories are a heavily embedded aspect in indigenous culture, and there was an awareness even centuries ago that the night sky was a window and a connection to alternate realities and to the spirit world itself. We are a small piece of the universe's expansive nature and to our home within the Milky Way galaxy, which we share with billions of stars and countless more moons and planets. Our star, the grandfather sun, resides at the center of our planetary system and is the heart of all ceremonies within indigenous culture. These ceremonies showcase a depth of knowledge and wisdom and highlight the importance stars play in the daily life of indigenous people from around the world. So I'm just going to jump ahead. This is the story behind this card and the way in which, you know, it's associating the keywords of spirit world to the idea of the Milky Way itself and the stars. If I may say something, I've always been absolutely fascinated by the Milky Way. I mean, to me, it was just incredible that this phenomenon would occur. So it says, if you have drawn the Milky Way card, it may reflect on sudden insights about past lives or coincide with strong feelings of deja vu that feel divinely guided. It suggests that now is the time to see and accept the bigger picture of your current reality. Rather than dwell on feelings of helplessness or feel bogged down by the weight of your concerns, remember that you are made of stardust and are a sacred piece of the divine nature of the universe. Okay, sorry, I had to edit that out because I actually kind of choked there. So as you can see, it's a very intense kind of message, and if we are ready to listen, this is going to happen more and more in the last few days of the month. I can assure you 100%. So take this message if this is for you as well. I know that this is for me. I know exactly what she means with that, and I agree. It's just that it's kind of hard. Anyway, so after this, let me repeat. So we start with who's here, who's come to see us, and then this number 2 is what is their message for me. Number 3 is how can I best honor them, and number 4 is again from the Beloved Dead Oracle, but in this case we're just gonna take the few cards that are with the title Act of Love. So we're going to see what the message is, which is generally speaking also an encouragement. If you feel like you want to use a different deck, you can. Of course, this is the wrap-up. Generally speaking, when I choose a deck for a wrap-up, I tend to avoid decks that have a strong, let's say, active kind of message as opposed to passive. Because that's more like, I find that in positions in the spread itself and not necessarily as a wrap-up message. A wrap-up message should be an affirmation card, if you know what I mean, or something similar. But it shouldn't be something that still requires you to take any kind of action. It should just be something that wraps up the message. But in this case, it's probably a slightly different kind of outcome depending on which card I'm going to pick. So again, that position number 4 is just, you know, a blessing for this season. So as a blessing for this season, I choose this card. Doesn't want to count. Self-preservation. Okay, yep, I get it completely. Okay, so obviously in this case, it's just a reminder of taking care of ourselves, because we can be really harsh with ourselves sometimes. And I feel that there's a lot of people out there really not paying attention to their own feelings, because they have to provide, you know, they have to produce, they have to make something, they have to study something, they have to do something, they have to earn something, they have to learn something. You don't always have to be active, you don't always have to you know, deplete your energies. In some cases, even rest is actually productive. Life is made up of ebb and flows, and it's not it's impossible to just be one way or another. It's just, it doesn't make sense, because it would not be let's say the human condition really has this prerogative for us that we need to have some ups and some downs as well. So rest is the moment in which we actually take care of ourselves, and it is productive as well. So this is an absolute cracker of a spread. I literally had to edit a part out because I really choked up. It wasn't meant to be this personal, but I said at the beginning, to my defense, I said at the beginning that the veil is really thin, and I particularly feel it this season more than other years, so that's my excuse. In any case, I really hope you enjoyed this spread. If you use it, let me know what you think about it. If you use it with different decks as well, let me know. But just a recommendation for you to be open, or just don't be scared, just be open to receive these messages, because it's the one time of the year in which we can actually get back in touch and communicate with those we loved that are not there with us anymore. So that was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.